The Tight Five.
iOS, it's only sport. Martin Devlin, Lachlan Waugh on tour en France. Rugby World Cup just days away from the two semi-finals. And such a different feeling this week as opposed to last week. Last week ahead of Ireland, it was nerves, it was apprehension, it was tension, it was the unknown. Because the truth was we didn't know. We had an All Black side that, full of potential, that over the last year and a bit had played well in bits, but putting it all together against an absolutely quality opponent when it mattered most, we all had every reason to doubt. And, whoever puts their hand up and says, oh, no, I saw this coming, well, good on you, because I didn't. And I don't know that many people that did. Congratulations again to Ian Foster. I mean, he retained a quiet confidence, did he not? A dignified confidence right throughout. Here we are, though, ahead of Argentina and also South Africa versus England. And again, I think most people, realistically, have already decided that it's a repeat of the 1995 World Cup final. It's Tight Five time on iOS, and what that is myself and Lachlan every day on the show, and that is aired 1 till 4, Monday to Friday on the platform. And normally, which will happen again once we get back from France, there's also a podcast put out every night, highlights of the show. The podcast at the moment, because of time constraints and so forth, we're just putting up some of the big interviews that we do. Also, you can, of course, enjoy the platform content via YouTube, our channel there, via Facebook. If you sign on to Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to all of the shows in full. Tight Five time, which means 5 separate sporting topics, roughly a minute or so on each. They're all rugby related towards this Rugby World Cup. And when the bell goes ding, we move on to the next one. The lineup picked to play by Foz for Argentina. Argentina's expectations, what they bring to this particular match. South Africa versus England, is that a walkover? Angus Gardner as ref. Complacency, given the fact, Lachlan, that, as I said, most of us are expecting New Zealand versus South Africa in the final. And I also want to talk about Rieko Ioane and that gesture, the cupping of the ear towards the Irish fans after the quarter-final, which we haven't talked about yet, but it seems to have angered some in Ireland. So we may have one or two more than just the 5. But first up, the way that we're going to attack this game as opposed to the way that we played Ireland, do you see any significant change in the tactics the All Blacks are going to employ against Argentina?
I think there was the way they played against Ireland for the first at least 5 or 10 minutes was very, I guess old school would be the right word, where they just worked through so many phases, worked through the trenches close to the breakdown, and then kept pounding away and then kicked a penalty. Whereas the All Blacks typically, especially if they've got an edge over their opponent from the physical standpoint, they will try and throw the ball around and open up the field. And I'd suspect they'll do that against Argentina, because in terms of the quality up front, Argentina obviously have a very good pack, but I think with the quality up front mixed in with what we have in our backline, we've got more skilled players in key positions. So I think we'd have more confidence in throwing the ball around and knowing we can open up Argentina as opposed to Ireland, who, before the game against Ireland, we were talking about how well-rounded they are, where they have the forward pack that can match up with South Africa, they have the backline that can open up a team like Scotland, and defensively, there's very little holes, if any, in that defence. It's not the same with Argentina. They're not well drilled the same way. They're not as finely tuned pretty much in every facet of the game. Strange thing to say about a team that's in the semi-finals, saying they're not as good as a team who've just been knocked out. But I think we'll just have that calmness of being able to throw the ball around and play a more expansive style that we probably wouldn't have had ahead of the Ireland game.
I expect the same as what you saw at Mendoza. I think the All Blacks are going to go like an absolute rocket to start with and put this game away after 20 minutes. Because if you remember the very first test of the year, people, it was over then. And then in the second half, it did get really messy, cleared the benches, and I think on the scoreboard, I think Argentina won that second half. But that was a game that was pretty much won in the first 25 minutes, and the All Blacks weren't threatened after that. That's what I'm picking. I'm just picking a rocket ride from the All Blacks here, that they will employ all the skills, all the pace, and just blow this team off the park. That will be the way that they want to win this game, they want to win it, and they want to win it early. Yeah. Argentinian expectations. Have they overachieved by already making this semi-final? And do you think that they might believe that? Because I just go back to the way that they celebrated after they beat Wales, and that was a team that was celebrating as though they'd won something. Yes, they had won something. They'd won a place in the semi-finals, but they looked as though that maybe they were a little surprised themselves.
Well, it's a bit like the way that we celebrated after our win against Ireland.
There you go.
Probably deep down, Not that our players didn't think they could win, but they knew that it was going to be a huge achievement if they could. Same thing with Argentina. Well, they deserve to be there because they're there. It's really hard to get by an 80-minute game with a whole lot of luck and just stumbling over the try line or finding yourself with the ball, touching it down and whatnot. I don't think rugby or any sport really is something that you can luck your way into a victory. In saying that, they've benefited off the draw and they've benefited of how the 4 best teams in the world were shoved into 2 pools, and then the other side of the draw had very underwhelming by comparison. So there is an overachievement of sorts there, but at the same time, it's how everything's worked out, and they beat a team that many thought, including themselves maybe, they probably wouldn't beat. I thought Wales would win. I think you did as well.
Well, halfway through the game, I thought that Wales would win. They were up, they had a little lead, 12-10 or something like that, and then you just
they had a 10 or 13-3 lead.
There you go, and you just thought at that stage, I actually thought the game was over at that stage, and I was quite surprised all of a sudden that Argentina got their way back in, which I suppose is a good warning sign for us, as is Christchurch last year, as is the fact that we did lose.
Well, as is the familiarity as well. Yeah. I think one thing that Argentina will like going into this game is they play the All Blacks twice every single year, once in World Cup years, and it has been that way since 2012. So there'll be a comfort of, okay, we know this team, we know how they're going to come at us, we've played them before, and especially this rendition of this All Blacks being coached by Ian Foster and the bulk of these players, we've played them quite a bit and beaten them a couple of times over the last few years.
And I think it's important to remember as well that there's no starstruck factor here, and I've always thought over the decades that when we played Argentina that they kind of like almost, I'm not trying to be patronising or anything, but they really enjoyed the fact that they were playing the All Blacks. Whereas now they absolutely regard themselves as an opponent of the All Blacks. And I'm not so sure over the decades whether they thought that. Plus Michael Cheika. I look at this guy, the Eddie Jones thing about him, what this would do for his career if he managed to knock off the All Blacks in a World Cup semi-final. That would just elevate him into, amongst the very best world coaches to have coached at a Rugby World Cup. That victory alone. Plus, this would be the biggest shock ever for an All Black side at any World Cup if we managed to bottle this somehow.
It would be. It would. I mean, the two that would come to mind would be the semi-final of 1999, and I was 2 years old when that was played, or the quarterfinal of 2007, both against France. But at those times, France weren't a rubbish side.
No, they weren't.
There wasn't a distinct, consistent gap between us and them. They were a competitive team. Of course, they've been to 3 World Cup finals, for goodness sake. Whereas Argentina, as much as there's been times where they've been as good as France, I mean, at that 07 tournament, they beat France twice and came third, and every now and then they've managed to find their way into the semi-finals at a World Cup. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time they've done so.
Third semi-final.
Third, so yeah. It'd be a huge achievement for them. It'd be a massive achievement for Cheika. For the All Blacks, it would be something...
It would be a worse feeling than losing to England in that semi-final, is what it would be.
It'd be so strangely deflating and foreign. I mean, the loss to England hurt because we were just so badly out. It was men against boys. It was such a strange thing to watch.
Like a mismatch.
I'd never seen a team outplay the All Blacks in such a manner. Whereas if we lost to Argentina, it would be similar, but I think it would be like that France quarterfinal of 2007 or something.
Yeah, where we just didn't play. It would be like Christchurch all over again.
What the hell? What did I just watch?
Well, I mean, how could we possibly play that back?
It'd be a case of we're fumbling around and we fail to actually take advantage of or take control of the game. Whereas the England 1 or 4 years ago was we never got a look in. So it'd be a lot different, but it'd be a very dark day for New Zealand rugby if that happened.
Angus Gardner as the ref. Do we need to talk about Angus Gardner?
No. Because I don't like talking about the refs a huge amount, because I've never thought that there's one who stands out distinctly from the others. There's one who's so poor compared to the others. There's a couple of English refs who aren't that great. But when you talk about Wayne Barnes, I've always liked Angus Gardner, Nick Berry, the Australian as well. I quite like him. Ben O'Keefe. I don't think there is anything distinctly different, either better or worse, among maybe the top 4 or 5 refs in the world. So when I saw Angus Gardner got the All Blacks test, I was like, cool, I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
felt
care.
the same as well.
Because if you're playing well...
I mean, here's a guy who also refs Southern Hemisphere rugby. Okay, so, I mean, down in the Southern Hemisphere, whenever we get a French, we go, oh. Whenever we get a Northern Hemisphere, oh.
Yeah, but why do we do it?
Because it's different interpretations,
I know,
mate.
But the interpretations are only ever a problem if you're towing the line of what's good or bad in terms of I don't know, at the breakdown, are your hands on the ground, or are you on the ball? I mean, if they're on the ground, it's a penalty because you're using the ground to support your weight. I've never... It's something that's kind of frustrated me. If we're sitting there going, oh, this ref, oh, he's got this game. Well, we're assuming that it's going to get to a point in the game where the ref is going to decide the game instead of ourselves. The All Blacks fans shouldn't be worried at all about who the ref is, because it shouldn't get to a point in this game where one or two referee calls should determine it. We should run away with this game.
I agree.
So, I mean, I don't care what the ref is. As long as the All Blacks go out there, they don't make mistakes, they don't give the ball away, they don't give stupid penalties away, and they control the game the way they should, then whoever the ref is, it shouldn't matter. You could get one of us to maybe ref, and it shouldn't be an issue. It should never be a talking point.
We'll talk about this tomorrow as well. South Africa versus England, because they have their team press announcements tomorrow. Conference, rather, clumsy way of saying it, but they name their teams tomorrow. South Africa, England. Is it a walkover as well? Is this a lay-down Springbok win?
No.
No?
It's closer than our game with Argentina. The Springboks are the favourites. They should be the favourites. They're the better team. They like to play silly, weird little games though with their selections, and when guys come on or off, whether they have a 7-1 split or they go with a 5-3 split last weekend, which was a bit surprising.
That's on the bench, yeah.
Yeah, on the bench, of course, yep. So England have the tools to turn up and make this a real tight contest. They'll have we talked about this yesterday, the determination to do it without a doubt, because it's England rugby. They've always got a bit of an edge about them in terms of their attitude and how they chew themselves up. But that can only take you so far, and the Springboks are a better side. I think this will be within about sort of anywhere between 8 and 10 points win for the Springboks. I think it'll be close, but it's not a walkover the way that I think the All Blacks and Argentina will be. And if England find a way to win, I think it's a little bit like England and New Zealand 4 years ago. It was a shock that England won, but at the same time, they were a team that had the talent, they had the coach, and they seemed like a tournament-hardened team, which is what I feel like the Springboks are now. So
I also feel that England haven't had their massive game in them yet.
Yeah.
And you kind of think at all World Cups that you time your run. I'm hoping Argentina's massive game was against Wales last week. We've had our massive game against Ireland. The Boks had that loss, so they've had this, huge titanic struggle to beat France. I'm just wondering whether, and this is the great thing about World Cup tournaments and the unknown, whether England have that and whether or not they can repeat what they did 4 years ago to the Boks.
Now, part of that would also come down to your coach, wouldn't it?
Well, that's, again, the big question, because Borthwick has shown nothing since he's become coach.
Nothing against him. He doesn't seem like the most empowering, exciting guy.
No.
The things he says in press conferences.
And his team doesn't play. Plays in a reflection of him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and whether you can tie those two things together, well, of course, on this side of the microphone, we do. Final topic is, and I asked this question at the presser today about Rieko. Much was made in the Irish media about Rieko cupping his hand behind his ear towards the Irish fans at the end of the quarter-final. We didn't actually see this because we'd kind of left the press area at that stage and headed downstairs, and apparently there was some words exchanged with him and Johnny Sexton, who had a crack at him and all of this kind of stuff. And the reporter that reported on this, interpreting this as some kind of up you in your face kind of gesture. I'm hoping that most sports fans actually, think of it as a bit of banter, because the Irish were in full voice. They were singing. They sang all over the haka. You can decide whether that's disrespectful or what for yourself. When you're inside that stadium and you've got 80,000 people there, you're not telling people when to sing, when to shout, when to shut up. I mean, that just happens. I mean, it takes over regardless, right? Did you mind it? And do you think it is appropriate? Do you even care about it?
No, I think it's totally fine. I don't think it's inappropriate at all. I think, look, when we noticed this as well when we were there, because we were on the very edge of the media area, and there were Irish fans next to us that we got to know during the night, and they were giving it to us every time Irish scored.
Every time,
but it was in a fun banter way.
Yeah,
it wasn't in a real dickheadish militant sort of way. They weren't behaving like that. They were just having a bit of a laugh and whatnot. And we were sort of, to a degree, giving it back to them whenever the All Blacks scored, because that's what you do. Now, I can only assume that pretty much every other Irish fan in the crowd, or most of the others, were giving it to All Blacks fans, and the ones close to the field were probably giving it to some of the players every time an All Blacks fan.
Well, I can actually tell you this. Look, I just happened to be wandering around the Louvre yesterday and bumped into Ronnie Clark and Caleb, and Caleb said that. He said where the dirty dirties were sitting, there was Irish fans in front of them, and every time Ireland scored a point, they were turning around, they were standing up, they were and doing all of that. And he said the security came over and told them to sit down and stop doing that, or they'd actually chuck them out. So, it's not even a fine line. I think most of us are adults enough to know when it is and when it doesn't cross that line. And that's why I have not a problem. I mean, they were giving it to the All Blacks the whole game. He's giving a go. You aren't singing anymore. Exactly. You're not singing anymore. That's all he was doing, wasn't he?
Now, if from all I've seen, as long as he wasn't doing it to the players, if he's doing it to the Irish players, that's a bit that's a bit of a dick move. But he's doing it to the fans who are, as you say, singing all game, singing during the haka, which I don't care about, by the way. If you're doing it to the fans, I don't have a problem because they didn't shut up the whole game, which again I don't mind. But this is all part of sport. It's all part of it, isn't being a sports fan and the atmosphere at games
and getting caught up in the emotion of the event.
And there's only one person, an Irish reporter, I'm pretty sure, who wrote about this. No one else did.
Yeah, the guy called Jerry Thornley did.
Yeah. So with all due respect to Jerry, is that his name? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jerry. So with all due respect to Jerry, I just think he was a bit of a sore loser on the night and didn't like the fact that Rieko did it and wanted to write something about it. Because if it was say it was England 4 years ago, and England players were giving it to the All Blacks fans in the crowd, and I was there and you were there. It's easier to say if we were there because it happened so long ago, but I wouldn't care. I wouldn't go out of my way to write a story about it because I'd say, fair enough. Like, you can be a dick.
Cop it like it should because we got beat and beaten up.
Look at the score. You can be an absolute dick in the way you behave and you can be arrogant, but if you can it's like the Penrith Panthers last year in the NRL. They didn't behave that in the most respectful manner to the Parramatta Eels and fans and whatnot after the grand final. At the end of the day, they're the best team. So you can't, as long as they're not being right dicks about it. I don't know. I think if they're the winner and they're saying, look at me, look, I'm the best. I just don't have a problem with it. I don't.
Devlin.
Have you seen my wiener?
The platform.